Kuhn Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @KuhnReview, that is @CuendReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@kuhnreview.com. That is INFORMATION@CuendReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the National on Friday the 5th of July, from the news section. Israel-Palestine. Benjamin Netanyahu resumes ceasefire talks. This article is written by Aaron Burns-Lees. An Israeli official says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will dispatch negotiators to resume Gaza ceasefire talks. Diplomatic efforts aimed at ending the 9-month war in Gaza appear to be stirring back to life after a weeks-long hiatus. On Wednesday evening, the militant Hamas group said it gave mediators its latest response to a US-backed proposal for a phased ceasefire. The US has rallied world support behind a plan for a phased ceasefire that calls for the release of all of the scores of hostages still held by Hamas in return for a lasting truce and the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. But until now, neither side appears to have fully embraced it. Hamas suggested amendments to the proposal last month, some of which the US said were unworkable, without providing specifics. For his part, Netanyahu has given conflicting stances. He confirmed that the original proposal was an Israeli one, but he has also said he would accept only a partial deal, after which Israel would return to its military campaign to destroy Hamas. A US official said the Biden administration was examining Hamas's latest response, calling it constructive, but saying more work needed to be done. Hamas political official Basim Naim said the group has neither accepted nor rejected the American proposal and has responded with some ideas to bridge the gap between the two sides without elaborating. Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's top political leader, shared suggestions with Egyptian, Qatari and Turkish officials, according to Hamas' statement late on Wednesday. US officials have said the latest proposal has new language that was proposed to Egypt and Qatar on Saturday and addresses indirect negotiations that are set to commence during the first phase of the 3-phase deal that President Joe Biden laid out in a May the 31st speech. The first phase calls for a ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from all densely populated areas of Gaza, and the release of a number of hostages, including women, older people and the wounded, in exchange for the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. The proposal called for the parties to negotiate the terms of the second phase during the 42 days of Phase 1. Under the current proposal, the negotiations are meant to lead a sustainable calm and a withdrawal of all Israeli troops from Gaza, with the release of all remaining men, both civilians and soldiers, held captive by Hamas in return for an Israeli release of Palestinian prisoners. The third phase would see the return of the remains of hostages. The transition from the first to the second phase has appeared to be the main sticking point. Hamas is concerned that Israel will restart the war after the first phase, perhaps after making unrealistic demands in the talks. Israeli officials have said they want negotiations to lead to Hamas's removal from power in Gaza, a provision not spelled out in the proposal. They have also pushed for a time limit on negotiations to keep pressure on Hamas and prevent it from drawing out talks and the initial ceasefire. In a lengthy television interview last month, Netanyahu said that he was prepared to make a partial deal, but was committed to continuing the war after a pause in order to annihilate Hamas. Later, speaking before Israel's parliament, he said Israel remains committed to the deal outlined by Biden. The war began when Hamas-led militants launched a surprise attack on October the 7th into southern Israel, attacking multiple army bases and farming communities and killing around 1,200 people, mostly civilians. They abducted another 250 people, more than 100 of whom were released during a week-long ceasefire in November. Militants are still holding around 80 hostages and the remains of 40 others. In its campaign in Gaza since the attack, Israel has killed more than 38,000 Palestinians, according to health officials in Gaza, who don't say how many were civilians or militants. Israel's bombardment, ground offensives and restrictions on Gaza have caused vast destruction across the territory, displaced most of its population of 2.3 million, often multiple times, and caused widespread hunger, raising fears of famine. That article was written by Aaron Burns-Lees. This is from The National on Friday the 5th of July, from the news section. Loch Ness. Yacht saved from running aground at busy canal by RNLI. This article is written by Alistair Ferguson. A yacht which lost power and was dangerously close to running aground has been rescued by a lifeboat team. A German yacht was almost beached at the entrance of the Caledonian Canal after it suffered electrical problems and lost power on Monday evening. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution, RNLI, Loch Ness's lifeboat, scrambled at about 7:45 p.m. The team raced down the canal to aid the stranded yacht, which was about 30 minutes away from running aground, according to the rescue service. The lifeboat crew were able to tow the yacht, named Mintaka, to bring them alongside the sailing barge Ross Crana at the canal entrance at Fort Augustus. The lifeboat then scouted the canal pontoons for a suitable space which they described as extremely busy at the time. In a statement posted online, a spokesperson for RNLI Loch Ness said, at 19:45 on Monday the 1st of July, the lifeboat crew were paged to assist the German yacht Mintaka that had suffered electrical problems and lost power and propulsion at the entrance to the canal at Fort Augustus. The lifeboat made best speed down the loch and established contact with the yacht that was close to running aground in the river entrance next to the canal within 30 minutes. The crew established an immediate alongside tow and put them alongside the sailing barge Ross Crana at the canal entrance, whilst the lifeboat then scouted the canal pontoons for a suitable space, as it was extremely busy. Having identified a suitable spot, the lifeboat re-established an alongside tow and repositioned the casualty vessel to the pontoons. The lifeboat then returned to station to be refuelled and made ready for service. Helm Kieran Tarling added, "Calm conditions helped in this shout, and the well-prepared and professional actions by the yacht's crew were appreciated by the lifeboat helm and crew, as was the assistance of the crew of the Ross Crana." That article was written by Alistair Ferguson. This is from The National on Friday the 5th of July, from the news section. MND clinical trials get £500,000 windfall for Doddy Weir's birthday. This article is written by Steph Braun. Clinical trials into motor neurone disease, MND, have received a £500,000 boost from the charity founded by late rugby legend Doddy Weir on what would have been his 54th birthday. Weir, who made 61 appearances for Scotland, was diagnosed with a terminal condition in 2016 and set up the My Name's Doddy Foundation to boost research into the disease. The father of 3 died from MND in November 2022, aged 52. The foundation announced on Thursday that the £500,000 will support sites across the UK to deliver MND trials by funding the time of clinical staff. The trials aim to speed up the search for effective treatments in a bid to find a cure for the devastating condition, which affects around 5,000 people in the UK. The foundation has already invested more than £3 million in trial centres to help recruit staff for the work and to support the delivery of trials. It has so far committed more than £11 million for MND research overall, with a further £2 million invested in supporting MND patients. A further £6 million has been committed to research by the end of this year. News of the latest funding boost comes on what was Weir's birthday, with fans encouraged to mark the occasion by wearing tartan as a tribute to him. Jessica Lee, Director of Research at My Name's Doddy Foundation, said, "When Doddy was diagnosed in 2016, there were few MND clinical trials running in the UK. Since then, there have been significant progress and an increased investment in MND trials. Today, the landscape is very different. There are many clinical trials running nationwide. However, despite the increasing number of trials, not all centres are currently able to deliver them at pace due to a lack of specialised staff with dedicated time to spend on MND projects." Doddy was passionate about the need for more MND clinical trials to give newly diagnosed people hope and purpose and to accelerate the search for effective treatments. This commitment of an additional £500,000 to support individual trial centres will enable them to buy out the time of specialised staff to work on MND clinical trials and make a real difference in our ongoing mission to end MND. Dr. Tim Williams, consultant neurologist at Newcastle Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust, where a clinical trial is run, said, "The support we have received has been absolutely fundamental to a sea change in MND trial conduct and activity in Newcastle. It's been a great thing, and I only hope such support continues and might reasonably be rolled out elsewhere. I think this is a highly effective and tangible use of funds." Paul Thompson, Director of Fundraising at the My Name's Doddy's Foundation, said, "Today would have been Doddy's 54th birthday, and there seems no more appropriate way to honour him than with a sea of tartan. We urge as many people as possible to join us today and beyond to raise awareness of MND and remind us of the relentless need to pursue Doddy's legacy, a world free of MND." That article was written by Steph Braun. This is from The National on Friday the 5th of July, from the news section. Scottish Council issues warning as vape causes major fire. This article is written by Adam Robertson. The Scottish Council has issued a warning to residents of Perth and Kinross after a disposed vape caused a major blaze at a recycling centre. Emergency services attended a fire at the industrial unit on Friarton Road shortly after midday on Sunday, May the 19th. It took 4 appliances and a high-reach vehicle to get the fire under control, although there were no injuries. Almost 7 weeks later, Perth and Kinross Council has revealed the cause of the large-scale fire was due to a vape combusting when it was crushed. The devices, which contain lithium batteries, can overheat if they are not recycled properly. Perth and Kinross Council has now taken to social media to urge residents to dispose of electricals properly. A statement said, "This blaze at the council's Friarton depot was caused by a lithium-ion battery, as they can combust when crushed. Luckily, this time nobody was hurt. Please dispose of your electricals in the correct way to reduce the risk of fires." The official advice on disposing vapes from the council is as follows. Small electricals should be placed in the small electrical appliances skip at any recycling centre. If you can take out the battery from the appliance by hand, please take it out and place it in the battery barrel next to the skip. Do not place any electrical items with a lithium-ion battery in the scrap metal skip. They should only be placed in the small electrical appliances skip. Vapes should be recycled in the vapes container at any recycling centre or at any shop that sells vapes. Household batteries should be recycled in the household batteries container at any recycling centre or at any shop that sells batteries. According to figures from Zero Waste Scotland, an estimated 26 million disposable vapes were thrown away in Scotland in the last year, with more than half of these being disposed of incorrectly. That article was written by Adam Robertson. This is from the National on Friday the 5th of July from the news section. Sir Keir Starmer gives victory speech after Labour election win. This article is written by Joshua Searle. Sir Keir Starmer said the UK was again experiencing the sunlight of hope after a Labour landslide put him on course to be the next Prime Minister. Tory leader Rishi Sunak conceded defeat after a sobering night for his party, which saw a record 8 cabinet ministers lose their seats. At a victory rally in central London, Starmer said the country could now get its future back. He told jubilant activists, "We did it," adding, "Change begins now." Speaking at his victory speech, Starmer said, "It feels good, I have to be honest," as results reached the halfway point. The Labour leader said, "We did it. You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now. It feels good, I have to be honest. 4.5 years of work changing the party, this is what it is for, a changed Labour Party, ready to serve our country, ready to restore Britain to the service of working people. And across our country, people will be waking up to the news, relief that a weight has been lifted, a burden finally removed from the shoulders of this great nation. And now we can look forward, walk into the morning, the sunlight of hope, pale at first, but getting stronger through the day, shining once again on a country with the opportunity, after 14 years, to get its future back." He added, "But a mandate like this comes with a great responsibility. Our task is nothing less than renewing ideas that hold this country together. National renewal, whoever you are, wherever you start in life, if you work hard, if you play by the rules, this country should give you a fair chance to get on. It should always respect your contribution, and we have to restore that." Starmer added in his victory speech, "Alongside that, we have to return politics to public service, show that politics can be a force for good. Make no mistake, that is a great test of politics in this era. The fight for trust is the battle that defines our age. It is why we campaign so hard on demonstrating we're fit for public service. Service is a precondition for hope. Respect a bond that can unite a country. Together, the values of this changed Labour Party are the guiding principle for a new government. Country first, party second." That article was written by Joshua Searle.
From the National, Monday the 8th of July, from the news section, Anti-monarchy groups to protest pantomime King's speech. Article by Steph Braun. Anti-monarchy campaigners have confirmed plans to protest the pantomime state opening of Parliament next week. It will be the second state opening in a row Republic has demonstrated against, and the group has pledged to continue to protest all major royal events until the monarchy is abolished. On Wednesday, July 17th, the organisation will be supported by Labour for a Republic as Keir Starmer's government lay out their legislative plans via the King's speech. Graham Smith, Republic CEO, said last week's general election is likely to have brought dozens more Republicans into the Commons within Labour, the Lib Dems, the SNP and the Greens. He said he wants to show that the anti-monarchy movement is not going away. Smith said, "We're excited to be returning to the state opening, one of the key events in the royal calendar. We want to send a clear signal that we're not going away and that this new parliament represents a new opportunity for the movement." Last November, hundreds of protesters turned up opposite Parliament to protest against the monarchy and the King's role in our Parliament. "Our Parliament is opened by a king wearing a crown while sitting in the Lords. It is just weird we continue with this pantomime that celebrates the worst, least democratic aspects of our political system. Republic continues to enjoy unprecedented growth and our protests show no sign of stopping or slowing down. This is about more than the monarch. It's about the place of the crown in Parliament and the ramshackle state of our constitution. This is a Parliament that will see changing attitudes to the monarchy reflected in political debate. That work starts on July 17th. The state opening of Parliament marks the start of a formal parliamentary year, with the monarch setting out the government's agenda for the coming session. Ahead of the King's speech, there are several traditions which take place which have previously been branded absurd by Republic. Last year, Scottish anti-monarchy group Our Republic said it is a play act that covers up the royal family's sway over legislation in the UK. It begins with a procession of the monarch from Buckingham Palace to Westminster. On arrival at Westminster, the King leads the royal procession through the Royal Gallery, packed with 600 guests, to the chamber of the House of Lords. The House of Lords official, known as Black Rod, is then sent to summon the Commons. The doors to the Commons chamber are shut in her face, a practice dating back to the Civil War, symbolising the Commons' independence from the monarchy. Black Rod strikes on the door 3 times before it is opened. Members of the House of Commons then follow Black Rod and the Common Speaker to the Lord's Chamber, standing at the opposite end to the throne, known as the Bar of the House, to listen to the speech. Last year, ex-SNP MP Stephen Bonner tore into the bizarre traditions and argued for the event to be toned down. And that report was by Steph Braun, and it was read by me, Ian McKenna. From the National, Monday the 8th of July, from the Politics section. David Lammy must end UK arms sales to Israel, urge Greens. By multimedia journalist Ross Hunter. The new Foreign Secretary David Lammy must urgently end UK arms sales to Israel, according to the Scottish Greens. The party pointed out that the UK's arms export criteria state that a weapon cannot be sold if there is a clear risk that it might be used in a serious breach of international humanitarian law. Before Labour's victory in the general election, Lammy stated that he had serious concerns about the conduct of the Israeli military in Gaza and urged the then Tory government to publish its legal advice relating to the continuation of arms sales to the country. However, then Foreign Secretary David Cameron refused to publish the advice, and arms sales to Israel have continued despite the increasing death toll in Gaza. For the last 9 months, the Tories have armed and supported Israeli forces, while they have inflicted grave war crimes and atrocities on the people of Gaza, said the Scottish Greens co-leader Patrick Harvey. It has been a moral disgrace. Now we have a new government and a new Foreign Secretary. They say they are committed to working for a ceasefire, but those words are meaningless if they continue to arm Israel. There are no two ways about it. Every day that they allow weapons to flow and provide military support and political cover is another day of complicity and genocide. In opposition, David Lammy called for the UK to publish the advice it received on the legality of arms exports. Now he is in government, he must live up to the standard he rightly demanded of others and immediately publish it. With the people of Gaza suffering one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, it is vital that we see an end to UK arms sales and a recognition of Palestine's right to self-determination. It comes after Keir Starmer made the case for a ceasefire during phone calls with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas on Sunday. And that report was by Ross Hunter. From the National, Monday the 8th of July, from the news section, Green Party complained to BBC over failure to broadcast election wins. Article written by Ross Hunter. The Green Party have submitted a complaint to the BBC after it failed to broadcast the party's historic election wins during its coverage of the general election results. While the BBC devoted large portions of its coverage during the campaign and on election night to Reform UK, the party ended up with just one more seat than the similarly sized Green Party of England and Wales. However, despite the Green Party vastly improving the representation in Westminster from 1 seat to 4, party leader Carla Denier's declaration was not broadcast. Green Party councillor Nate Higgins has now submitted an official complaint to the BBC, claiming there was no justification for appearing to ignore the party's victories. During the coverage of the general election, the BBC broadcast live the declarations of the leaders of Labour, Conservative, Liberal Democrats and Reform UK parties and their speeches, he said. Inexplicably, neither the declaration in Bristol Central, Carla Denier, or Waveney Valley, Adrian Ramsay, were broadcast, despite both being stunning gains for the Green Party's co-leaders. Their speeches were also not broadcast. There is no justification for treating the Green Party differently than every other English party leader. Additionally, the win in Bristol Central was simply announced as the Green Party have won Bristol Central. Now let's go to Ian Duncan Smith. He then accused the BBC of playing down the impact of the Green wins in the political landscape of the UK. Additionally, the BBC broadcast the declaration in the safe Labour seat of Brighton Kemp Town, but didn't broadcast the declaration in Brighton Pavilion, which was an interesting seat due to Caroline Lucas stepping down. North Herefordshire was also not broadcast. This had the effect of playing down the impact and scale of Green wins, and meant there was less airtime for Green politicians because their speeches were not broadcast. The Green Party had clearly telegraphed their target seats and potential gains, so ignorance is not an excuse for not broadcasting any of the declarations of Green MPs. It comes after the Scottish Greens also reported gains in the general election, placing third in a number of seats and gaining more than 13% of the vote in Glasgow South. The BBC has been contacted for comment, and that article was written by Ross Hunter. From the National, Monday the 8th of July, Leftist Coalition wins most seats in French elections. An article published on the 7th of July by Gregor Young, journalist. A coalition on the left that came together unexpectedly ahead of France's snap elections won the most parliamentary seats in the vote, according to polling projections on Sunday. The surprise projections put President Emmanuel Macron's centrist alliance in second place and the far right in third. The lack of majority for any single alliance plunged France into political and economic turmoil. Final results are not expected until late on Sunday or early Monday, in the highly volatile snap election, which was called just 4 weeks ago in a huge gamble for Macron. The deeply unpopular president lost control of Parliament, according to the projections. Marine Le Pen's far right drastically increased the number of seats it holds in Parliament, but fell far short of expectations. The snap legislative elections in this nuclear-armed nation and major economy will influence the war in Ukraine, global diplomacy, and Europe's economic stability. France now faces the prospect of weeks of political machinations to determine who will be Prime Minister and lead the National Assembly. And Macron faces the prospect of leading the country alongside a Prime Minister opposed to most of his domestic policies. French leftist leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon called the projections an immense relief for a majority of people in our country, and he demanded the resignation of the Prime Minister. Mélenchon is the most prominent of the leftist leaders who unexpectedly came together ahead of the two-round elections. The projections, if confirmed by official counts expected later on Sunday or early on Monday, plunge a pillar of the European Union and its second largest economy into intense uncertainty, with no clarity about who might partner with Macron as Prime Minister in governing France. The timing of France's leap into the political unknown could hardly be worse. With the Paris Olympics opening in less than 3 weeks, the country will be grappling with domestic instability when the eyes of the world are upon it. For 46-year-old Macron's centrists, the legislative elections have turned into a fiasco. He stunned France, and many in his own government, by dissolving Parliament's lower house, the National Assembly, after the far right surged in French voting for the European elections. Macron argued that sending voters back to the ballot boxes would provide France with clarification. The president was gambling that with France's fate in their hands, voters might shift from the far right and left and return to mainstream parties closer to the centre, where Macron found much of the support that won him the presidency in 2017 and again in 2022. That, he hoped, would fortify his presidency for his remaining 3 years in office. But rather than rally behind him, millions of voters on both left and right of France's increasingly polarised political landscape seized on his surprise decision as an opportunity to vent their anger and possibly sideline Macron by saddling him with a parliament that could now largely be filled with politicians hostile both to him and, in particular, his pro-business policies. Already in last weekend's first round of balloting, voters massively backed candidates from far-right National Rally in even greater numbers than in voting for the European Parliament. A coalition of parties on the left took second, and his centrist alliance was a distant third. A huge parliament with no single bloc coming close to getting the 289 seats needed for an absolute majority in the National Assembly, the more powerful of France's two legislative chambers, would be unknown territory for modern France and usher in political turmoil. Unlike other countries in Europe that are more accustomed to coalition governments, France does not have a tradition of politicians from rival political camps coming together to form a working majority. The sharp polarisation of French politics is sure to complicate any coalition building effort. Racism and anti-Semitism marred the electoral campaign, along with Russian disinformation campaigns, and more than 50 candidates reported being physically attacked, highly unusual for France. The government said it deployed 30,000 police for Sunday's runoff vote, an indication of both the high stakes and concerns that a far-right victory, or even no clear win for any bloc, could trigger protests. Any cobbled-together majority risks being fragile, vulnerable to no-confidence votes that could cause it to fall. Prolonged instability could increase suggestions from his opponents that Macron should cut short his second and last term. The French constitution prevents him from dissolving parliament again in the next 12 months, barring that as a route to possibly give France greater clarity. And the article was written by Gregor Young. From the National, Monday the 8th of July, from the news section. NC 500, locals rage at group of lunatic sports car drivers. Report by James Walker. Locals living on the North Coast 500 route have hit out at a group of dangerous sports car drivers. It started with a Facebook post, with one angry local man sounding the alarm. The Facebook post read, "Bunch of Lotus drivers heading to Lochainver driving like idiots, overtaking on blind corners and generally driving like lunatics. Lock up your kids and pets, Lochainver. These idiots appear to want to die." This led to other users slamming it as dangerous and expressing hope that it wouldn't lead to a crash and injure some innocent people. The NC500 is one of Scotland's most popular road trips, attracting thousands of visitors and growing every year. But this has often led to criticism from locals, and this isn't the first time locals have highlighted that people have increasingly been driving dangerously in the countryside. The route has faced issues with cars in the past. We reported last year how a group of petrol heads were snapped parking their supercars in dangerous spots along the route. Posting pictures on Instagram, a member of a squad of around a dozen supercars drivers took an aerial shot of their vehicles in the Kilscrew Bridge in Sutherland while the roads were open. And that report was by James Walker. From the National, Monday the 8th of July, from the news section. Prisoners in Scotland could be released after serving 2/3 of sentence. Report by Steph Braun. Long-term prisoners in Scotland could be released after serving 2/3 of their sentence under government plans. The Scottish Government has been wrestling with a rising prison population in recent months, with a programme of early release currently underway for more than 500 inmates. But, announcing the move earlier this year, Justice Secretary Angela Constance said more was needed to impact the population over the long term. A consultation published on Monday showed non-violent and non-sexual prisoners could be allowed out under licence after serving 2/3 of their sentence. This would be a return to the policy from before February 2016. Currently, prisoners are eligible to be released under licence 6 months from the end of their sentence. Those who are given an extended sentence, where a court enforces a period in prison followed by supervision after release, will also not be eligible. Constance said, supervision is commonly used as an element of custodial sentences, as part of efforts to prepare individuals needing the return to their community to settle and ultimately not to reoffend. Our proposals would bring forward the point at which long-term prisoners are released, so individuals spend more time under licence conditions in the community before the end of their sentence. Individuals who would continue to serve their sentence but do so in the community under strict supervision, which can improve reintegration back into society and reduce the risk of reoffending. We are considering these measures to find a better balance between the time spent in custody and time supervised in the community, particularly following the recent increase in the prison population when Scotland already has one of the highest in Western Europe. Public safety will be paramount. Release under licence conditions means strict community supervision and specific support in place informed by robust individual risk assessment of prisoners. These measures would be introduced through legislation requiring debate and the approval of Parliament. I invite people to share their views. The consultation will close on August 19th. The plans come as the Scottish Government released statistics showing an increase in the reconviction rate in 2021 compared to the previous year. The figures show a 2.6 percentage points rise to 26.9%, while the average number of reconvictions per offender increased by 8% from 0.41 to 0.44. Despite the recent increase, however, reconviction rates have been in a downward trend in the past decade, falling from 29.6% in 2011-12. Men were more likely to be reconvicted than women, while offenders who committed crimes of dishonesty were most likely to do so again. And that report was by Steph Braun, and it was read by me, Ian McKenna. From the National, Tuesday the 9th of July, from the politics section. Unfit for office. Suella Braverman in appalling anti-LGBT speech. Report by Ross Hunter. The former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has blamed the Progress Pride flag and Liberal Conservatives for the party's humiliating general election defeat. During a speech at the National Conservatism Conference in Washington, Braverman, who is among the likely candidates to launch a leadership bid to succeed Rishi Sunak, described the Progress Pride flag, which represents LGBT plus equality, as monstrous, as opposed to the historical Pride flag, which displays the colour of the rainbow. The Progress Pride flag also includes colours to represent people of colour, those living with HIV/AIDS, and transgender people. The Progress flag flew over our buildings as if they were occupied territory, she said. I wanted to scrap the unconscious bias training which basically taught people how bad and racist Britain was. I was told that I was on the wrong side of history by my senior civil servant. I couldn't even get the flag of a horrible political campaign I had disagreed with taken down from the roof of the government department I was supposed to be in charge of. My question, why is this happening, went to 10 Downing Street to the Prime Minister's office, and that's where the answer failed to come from. Because, to repeat this point once more, far too many Tory politicians agreed that the Progress flag must be flown. It shows how liberal and progressive we are, which is something many Conservatives want us to be. The Progress flag says one monstrous thing to me, that I was a member of a government that presided over the mutilation of children in our hospitals. Contrary to Braverman's claim, the minimum wage for receiving gender assignment surgery in the UK is 18 years old. Following the publication of the Cash Review, which was recently criticised by experts at Yale University, the prescription of puberty blockers and hormone treatment was also paused for new patients under 18 on the NHS in England and Scotland. Her speech suggests that her bid for the party leadership will focus on steering the Tories even further to the right, with a focus on culture war issues such as healthcare for the small number of transgender children in the UK. We won a great majority in 2019 promising to do what the people wanted, she said. We were going to use our Brexit freedoms and stop waves of illegal migrants. We were going to cut taxes. We were going to stop the lunatic woke virus. We did none of this. She continued, Our problem is us. Our problem is that the Liberal Conservatives who trashed the Tory party think it was everyone's fault but their own. My party governed as Liberals and we were defeated as Liberals, but, seemingly, as ever, it is Conservatives who are to blame. The speech has been widely condemned in social media. Scottish Labour MSP Monica Lennon said, Suella Braverman has chosen every word in her anti-LGBT speech deliberately to stoke fear and division for her own gain. She is unfit for public office. While campaigner Talat Yaqub said, It's going to be another appalling leadership bid in the Tories, where they clamber to watch as far right as possible whilst appearing moral. Relieved they are nowhere near power now, and hope that the influence of the particularly harmful few continues to diminish. And the article was written by Ross Hunter. From the National, Tuesday the 9th of July, from the news section. Reduced timetable to hit ScotRail services across country. Report by Stuart Patterson. A reduced temporary timetable is being introduced on ScotRail trains from tomorrow. The train operator said the service cuts are needed because fewer train drivers are available for overtime due to a dispute over pay. ScotRail said the new timetable will provide a certainty over what trains will run, while the union says the bosses should be negotiating a fair deal for drivers instead of cutting services for passengers. The reduced timetable will start on Wednesday with changes to the first and last trains on a number of routes and a reduced frequency throughout the day on many services. It comes after ASLEF, the train drivers' union, recommended a ballot on industrial action. ScotRail said over the past number of weeks it had been in paid discussions with ASLEF, RMT, TSSA and Unite. A formal pay offer in line with the Scottish Government's public sector pay policy was made on Friday, July the 5th, which was rejected by all 4 trade unions. Mark Ilderton, ScotRail Service Delivery Director, said, We are very sorry to customers for the disruption to services. We know that customers want certainty and reliability, which is why we are introducing a temporary timetable in place of late notice cancellations. We are operating services which the vast majority of customers use and are still using all the available trains in our fleet, so customers can continue to travel. We want to resolve the pay dispute with the trade unions and remain fully committed to further discussions. We're asking customers to check their journey on our website or mobile app, as train times will have changed. As I've said, ScotRail must invest in its workforce. Kevin Lindsay, Scottish organiser, said, rather than slashing the timetable in an act of economic vandalism that will impact towns and cities across Scotland, as well as Scotland's rail passengers, ScotRail and the Scottish Government must get serious about pay and urgently get back round the negotiating table with a serious and credible offer. The union said the latest offer was completely unacceptable. Lindsay added, the Scottish Government and ScotRail need to understand quickly that the investment in our railways includes investing in its most precious resource, its workers. We urge them to come back to us with an offer that is serious and that treats our members with the fairness and respect they deserve. ScotRail said it is currently recruiting 160 new drivers each year to improve resilience, but that some rest day working and overtime is still needed to deliver a normal timetable. It said this has historically been the case in the railway and is replicated in other train operators across Britain. And that article was written by Stuart Patterson. From the National, Tuesday the 9th of July, from the politics section, Richard Tice responds amid accusations of AI-generated Reform UK candidates. Report by Steph Braun. Reform UK's chairman has said he is steaming mad about accusations some of his party candidates at the general election were not real people. Richard Tice has denied reports his party used AI-generated candidates last week and has claimed they are defamatory and libellous. During the campaign, Reform was hit by a series of revelations about the online activities of some of its would-be MPs, from links to a British fascist leader, to suggestions the UK should have remained neutral in the fight against the Nazis, and admiration of Hitler's brilliant ability to inspire action. But now, there is speculation as to whether some of them even exist, with social media users pointing out that some of their pictures and leaflets appear to be AI generated. One user's post that has now gone viral said, "Is there any evidence that Mark Matlock, candidate for Clapham and Brixton Hill, actually exists? He looks AI generated." Private Eye magazine managed to track down Matlock, who admitted the image on the flyer was partly AI generated because there was no photo of him wearing the Reform's trademark turquoise tie, but he has insisted he is a real person. However, concerns remain over a number of other Reform candidates who appear to have almost no online presence and no sign of any contact details or biographies. Speaking to the Peston programme on ITV, Tice accused certain media outlets of reporting utter trash about his party. Asked about the claims, he said, "It's a total fabricated lie that is nothing short of defamatory, libellous and utterly outrageous. I'm steaming mad about it. To suggest we put forward false names and candidates. One of them was in hospital at the count with pneumonia. He nearly died, for heaven's sake. These people need to get a grip." A series of candidates listed on the Nigel Farage-led party's election website only showed their name in the constituency they stood in, without any information about them, or contact details beyond a generic regional email address. Under electoral rules, the only details that need to be given about the candidate is their full name and the constituency where they live. They must all have an agent and be nominated by 10 local voters. And the article was written by Steph Braun and read by me, Ian McKenna.
The National Politics on Wednesday the 10th of July. BBC Scotland wrapped after a report on Scottish votes at the general election. An article written by Xander Elliots. BBC executives have upheld complaints against a Reporting Scotland broadcast on Scottish votes at UK general elections, despite a spokesperson for the corporation previously standing by it. The news comes in the wake of a broadcast of Reporting Scotland in January, which sparked a backlash after a journalist claimed that in most UK elections, Scottish votes have been crucial to deciding who takes power. At the time, a BBC spokesperson insisted that the journalist had been correct, but the Executive Complaints Unit, or ECU, has now overruled them and said the remark actually fell short of the BBC's standards. Calling out the BBC report in January, ALBA General Secretary Chris McAlenny said it was completely fake news. A House of Commons report from 2010 underlines that, counting every general election between 1945 and the present day, Scottish votes had a material impact on the results on just 4 occasions. In the 2024 general election, Labour would have won a substantial majority in the Commons without any Scottish seats at all. Mr McAlenny added in January, "Scottish seats have not controlled the balance of power in a UK election in my lifetime. I'm sure that the BBC will be happy to correct this and not intentionally mislead the electorate." However, the BBC insisted to the National that it stood by the claim. A spokesperson dismissed concerns about inaccuracy, saying, "During the piece, our correspondent simply articulated the view that Scottish votes in UK general elections have been crucial, not only in determining which party gets a majority, but also the scale of victory and the ability of UK governments to hold and wield power over time." But now, 6 months on, the BBC's Executive Complaints Unit has ruled that the BBC Scotland report went beyond what the evidence could sustain and fell short of the BBC's standards of accuracy. In conclusions published on the day of the general election, the Executive Complaints Unit said it had considered 2 reports from viewers that in most general elections since 1945, Scottish votes had not been crucial to deciding who takes power. The Complaints Unit reported, the ECU considered the complainant's arguments and the analysis offered by the Reporting Scotland team in support of the correspondent's statement in the light of UK general election results in the last 45 years and since the end of World War II. It noted that the only occasions on which there could be certainty in the matter were those when the largest party would have had an overall majority even if it had won no Scottish seats, and so would certainly have taken power irrespective of Scottish votes, and that those cases were a minority in both scenarios. It considered that, while a case could be made in support of the correspondent's claim, it necessarily fell short of certainty because it rested on hypotheticals, and concluded that, because it was phrased as a statement of fact rather than an arguable proposition, it went beyond what the evidence could sustain and fell short of the BBC's standards of accuracy in this context. The ECU said that their conclusions had been reported to the management of BBC Scotland and discussed with the programme team. An article written by Sander Elliotts. The National News on Wednesday the 10th of July. CalMac extends invaluable vessels charter for 6 months. An article written by Lucy Garcia. A ferry that operates on a busy Scottish route has had its charter extended by 6 months after proving to be an invaluable addition to the fleet. Transport Scotland and ferry operator Caledonian McBrain announced that the MV Alfred, which serves on the Arran route from Troon to Brodick, will remain with the operator until March of 2025. The vessel, which was first chartered by CalMac from Pentland Ferries in April of 2023, will see its current charter end on the 21st of August. It's timetabled to operate its usual Ayrshire route until then. Caledonian McBrain's interim chief executive, Duncan Mackison, said, "The Alfred has proven to be an invaluable addition to our fleet during a particularly challenging period, and we're pleased that this extension will see her remain in service until next year. The extension of her charter will add resilience to our service for the remainder of the summer period and over the winter months when vessels enter overhaul for annual maintenance. During this extension period, we expect 2 new major vessels in the Glensannox and the Isle of Islay to enter service, putting us in a strong position to improve the lifeline services we provide to islands across our network. CalMac also confirmed the MV Caledonian Isles, one of its largest vessels, remains on schedule to return to service by the end of August this year. The vessel, which also serves Arran, has been in dry dock for repairs since January. Mr Mackison said the loss of the Caledonian Isles for a significant chunk of our summer timetable has had a detrimental impact on Arran and on the wider network, but we are confident that she will be in service by the end of August. Cabinet Secretary for Transport Fiona Hislop said, "I'm pleased that CalMac has reached an agreement with Pentland Ferries on a further 6-month extension of the charter for the Alfred, helping to maintain resilience on the Clyde and Hebrides ferry network for the rest of the summer and into the winter months." The Scottish Government is committed to improving our lifeline ferry services and better meeting the needs of island communities, with 6 new vessels currently under construction, set to join the fleet by 2026. An article written by Lucy Garcia. The National News on Wednesday, the 10th of July. North Coast 500 residents are furious over a campervan scheme. An exclusive article written by Steph Braun. Scots who live on the North Coast 500 have criticised a new tone-deaf voluntary motorhome scheme launched by Highland Council, which is supposed to help deal with over-tourism in the region. The local authority has introduced a new initiative which will entitle campervan owners to various benefits, such as inclusive overnight parking at a network of designated car parks. The 7-day pass costs £40 and is designed to help improve and sustain tourist infrastructure across the region, such as public toilets. It's not the same as a visitor tax, as people don't have to pay for it if they don't want to. The council says it wants to provide choice and empower those touring and visiting the Highlands. It's understood to be the first scheme of its kind in the UK, but it's been met with huge opposition, with residents on the North Coast 500 route describing it as a bonkers scheme that will not fix the problem of spiralling motorhome use. Jane Taylor from Thrumster near Wick told The National, "This scheme is completely tone-deaf to the concerns raised around the promotion of this type of tourism. I would say it will actually exasperate the issues even more and give even more entitlement to those already looking to park free in car parks and in laybys. Highland Council says it wants authentic and sustainable tourism, and it comes up with this. It's a bonkers idea that will only make it worse." A total of 28 caravan park businesses in the north have signed an open letter to Highland Council claiming that the new permit, which will allow motorhome users to stay in one of 12 designated car parks and to use washing and toilet facilities at public leisure centres, will put their businesses at risk. Ed Hall, who lives near Gerloch in Wester Ross, describes himself as a reluctant campaigner who is trying to protect our home environment from the damage inflicted on the Highlands by the relentless over-promotion of what was once a peaceful part of the country. He questioned the practicality of the scheme. What we and a good many others wish to see is enforcement of current legislation for the safety and benefit of both visitors and residents, and that, like any other visitor, if no legal, safe place to stay is available, then perhaps you can't come after all, said Mr Hall. Were I to arrive in Edinburgh in August to find the hotels booked up, do I have the right to berate the locals for a lack of provision at a price I want to dictate? Or should I expect Edinburgh Council to provide me with accommodation for free? The tiny villages of the Highland region simply cannot be expected to provide places for what appears to be an unlimited amount of motorhomes and campervans, apparently for free. The idea that if a vehicle is taxed and insured, that you can park anywhere unless restrictions prevent you doing so is only true for parking. It does not allow me to cook, shower and sleep in it. Council tax contributes 20% of the overall budget for statutory and non-statutory services, and the Council says supporting the scheme will allow people to take advantage of included benefits. Robin Pettigrew, who spoke to the National last year about his campaign for a vehicle-based levy for tourists, said he hoped the scheme would succeed in its aims, but he still maintained a compulsory tax on vehicles is the way forward. The Lochcarron resident, who is a chartered member of the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, said, "I'm aware how Highland Council has suffered under austerity, and consequently we have lost services, including the respected Highland Outdoor Access Ranges. Some form of income generation for the council to provide services to communities and visitors is needed, and the Visitor Levy Scotland Act will take time to process in whatever forms it appears up here. Clearly, the way forward is a vehicle-based levy. Our figures show that a vehicle levy would bring in excess of £22 million per annum. The high cost of clearing up after a significant minority of poorly behaved visitors, as evidenced in the Highland Council Outdoor Access Ranges annual reports, show the clear need for an enhanced ranger service and additional waste disposal facilities." The Visitor Levy Scotland Act was passed in May and enables councils to apply a levy on overnight stays, but Mr Pettigrew insists taxing vehicles will prove more fruitful in the Highlands. Another 76-year-old resident of Thurso, who asked not to be named, said that she despaired at what was happening to the Highlands because of over-tourism, as she described the voluntary initiative as a bad idea. She added that the scheme would be the final nail in the coffin for campsites on the route which already struggle to attract visitors. She said it's almost as though Highland Council is trying its best to make life as difficult as possible for people who actually live here, while at the same time making themselves a laughingstock to everyone, especially those tourists who are looking for a completely free holiday. A Highland Council spokesperson said, "Earlier this year, the public, partners and the Highland Council staff were invited to take part in a survey and share suggestions ahead of the Council's budget for 2024-2025. Emerging themes from the public engagement highlighted that people understood the need to raise income generation, with the most common suggestion to do so through campervans and motorhomes to help support sustainable tourism. For the 12 sites established in 2022, which are included in the voluntary scheme, engagement was undertaken at the time." An exclusive article written by Steph Braun. The National Politics on Wednesday, the 10th of July. Election agent has never met Reform ghost candidates. An exclusive front page article written by James Walker. A Reform UK election agent admitted that he has never met several of the candidates who ran for the party in Glasgow. Of the 6 candidates running for Nigel Farage's party in the city for the general election, 3 had no visible online presence at all and were registered to addresses in England. Helen Burns, Morag McRae and Jonathan Walmsley ran in Glasgow North, Glasgow South West and Glasgow North East, respectively, amassing thousands of votes. But David Stark, who also ran for Reform in Rutherglen and was listed as their election agent, told the National on his doorstep that he has never met any of them. It came amid concern on social media over Reform candidates across the UK who appear to have almost no online presence and have never stepped foot in the area that they stood in at the general election. A series of candidates listed on the Nigel Farage-led party's election website only showed their name and the constituency they stood in, without any information about them or contact details beyond a generic regional email address. Under electoral rules, the only details that need to be given about the candidate is their full name and the constituency where they live. They must all have an agent and be nominated by 10 local voters. When confronted about the ghost candidates, Mr Stark told the National that he had not met any of the candidates and wasn't sure whether any of them had ever been to Glasgow. He said that they were Reform members from England and were chosen given the time constraints with the election. "They've got votes. It gives people a chance to vote Reform," Mr Stark said. He added, "We had 2 weeks to organise 57 candidates in Scotland. Inevitably, some of them were paper candidates. Various people who were chosen were away on holiday or on business, and we had to substitute with other people. That's just what happens. I'm sure other parties have done the same thing." While paper candidates are not uncommon in UK politics, it's rare for so little information to be available about them online. An exclusive front-page article written by James Walker. The National News on Wednesday the 10th of July. Provost resigns after footage of bullying emerges. An article written by Lucy Garcia. A Scottish provost resigned after he berated a councillor to tears during a public meeting. Brian Boyd, the provost of Angus Council, said his behaviour fell below his personal standards after footage from the meeting showed him interrupting independent councillor Lois Speed, who was preparing to ask a question during a full council meeting in June. Mr Boyd was accused of being a verbal bully by a fellow councillor after the footage, which has been published by the BBC, emerged. He said he would continue as an independent councillor for the Carnoustie and District Ward. In a statement yesterday, Mr Boyd said, "While I've thoroughly enjoyed serving the people of Angus as their provost, I recognise that my behaviour fell below my own personal standards. Therefore, I will continue to put Angus first and be standing down with immediate effect." In the video, Ms Speed is seen attempting to ask a question, first saying that there had been key themes today in terms of local democracy. Mr Boyd then interrupts, stands and reads out the council's policy on standing orders before asking a shaken Ms Speed, "Have I made myself clear?" He said, "Councillor Speed, when I stand up, everyone here sits down. When the convener starts to speak, any member who is standing will resume his or her seat. No other member will stand and the convener will be heard without interruption. Have I made myself clear?" The meeting stopped for a break following the incident. When it returned, Mr Boyd apologised to Miss Speed, saying, "As you can see, it's been a very terse day, and I think this is the opportune moment for me to apologise to Councillor Speed for my overreaction. I'm a very dramatic person at the best of times, and I did go over the score. I hope you accept my apology." Scottish Conservatives councillor Craig Fotheringham called Mr Boyd an absolute disgrace during the meeting following his comments. He said, "I don't think Mr Boyd is fit to be in the position that he's in." An article written by Lucy Garcia. The National Politics on Wednesday the 10th of July. Scottish Tory leadership race begins as MSP argues for a lurch to the right. An article written by Xander Elliots. The Scottish Conservatives have begun preparing the ground for a leadership contest, with potential candidates arguing for and against the party lurching to the right. Yesterday, Tory MSP Stephen Kerr claimed that the Tories had been pussyfooting around the leftist consensus and should take an aggressive position against shibboleths like taxpayer-funded university fees, which are unworkable in the long term. In an article for The Telegraph, Mr Kerr also claimed that the Tories should be opposing free prescriptions and the unitary Scottish police force, as he laid out his stall for a potential leadership bid. However, writing for The Times, backbencher Jamie Green said there was little appetite for a reactionary lurch to the right in Scotland. Mr Green said that no IndyRef 2 could no longer serve as the Tories' sole tentpole and warned that ambitious jockeying for position could alienate Conservative activists already smarting from a bruising election. And other Tories will likely be making the case for breaking away from the UK Conservative Party, another senior MSP, Liz Smith, has said. The Scottish Conservatives will be looking for a new chief after Douglas Ross, who resigned in the middle of the general election campaign, eventually moves aside. Mr Ross failed to win the seat of Aberdeenshire North and Moray East, losing out to the SNP's Seamus Logan, while other Scottish Tory MSPs who stood for Westminster, including Mr Kerr, Sandish Culhane and Sue Webber, also failed to be elected. Mr Kerr called on Mr Ross to step aside to make way for an interim leader elected by MSPs to take over for the duration of the contest. The party should take its time in electing a new leader, Mr Kerr and Mr Green both argued, with the focus set to be on the new Labour government in London. There is no need to bounce the party into a quick coronation in time for the start of the new parliamentary session at Holyrood in September, Mr Kerr said. It would be entirely counterproductive when the leadership contest itself presents us with an opportunity to discuss the future of our party in a way we haven't done in more than a decade. Mr Green made similar remarks, writing, "The question I now pose is simple. Is the Scottish Conservative Party leadership hoping for a conveniently short contest with high barriers to entry to appoint its preferred candidate? Or is it willing instead to have a real and meaningful conversation about what sort of party they want any new leader to lead? I suspect some grandees prefer the former, a swift return to business as usual, a new face of continuity at the helm. I, however, and many others, believe the latter is a necessity. I'll say this frankly, the party must do this properly to ensure the widest possible debate, lest we risk political extinction. This is a perfectly timed opportunity. We haven't had one since the mighty Ruth Davidson took the reins." It's understood a formal decision on whether Mr Ross will remain as leader until after the contest to replace him has concluded is yet to be taken. Ms Smith, the Scottish Tories finance spokesperson and another senior MSP, has said she believed former candidate Murdo Fraser would stand to replace Mr Ross. Mr Fraser stood more than a decade ago with the key pledge to separate the Scottish Tories from the party in the rest of the UK, but lost out to the now Baroness Davidson. His push, Ms Smith predicted, would be part of the mix in the coming contest. An article written by Xander Elliotts. The National News on Wednesday the 10th of July. Tourists in court after going 100 miles an hour on the North Coast 500. An article written by Gregor Young. 2 tourists were charged with dangerous driving on the North Coast 500 route after being caught speeding at more than 100 miles an hour amid a police operation over the weekend. Officers with the Highlands and Islands Road Policing Unit found Swedish tourists David Jansson and Axel Akren, both 20, travelling at high speeds near to Laxford Bay in Scotland's far northwest. A sheriff court heard that Mr Jansson, in a grey Swedish-registered Porsche, was clocked doing 108 miles an hour, while police had to go to 105 miles an hour when chasing Mr Akren, who was driving a grey Swedish-registered BMW. At Inverness Sheriff Court, Sheriff Neil Wilson told the men, "By all means come here on holiday, but don't use the Highlands of Scotland as a playground or as a racetrack." The Press and Journal reported that the 2 Swedish tourists were both banned from UK roads for 16 months, and each ordered to pay £2,075. Elsewhere, officers said that a weekend of enforcement activity on the North Coast 500 route from July the 5th to July the 7th had resulted in 14 further drivers charged with speeding offences. On top of that, 2 drivers were charged for not wearing a seatbelt, 1 HGV driver was charged for driving whilst using a mobile phone, and 1 driver was charged for driving with an insecure load, police said. Sergeant David Miller from the Highland and Islands Road Policing Unit said, "We are committed to ensuring the safety of all road users on the North Coast 500 route, whether they are local residents or visitors enjoying the beautiful scenery. This weekend's operation is a reminder that we will take robust action against any driving offences we detect. We urge all drivers to be responsible for their own actions and to be considerate of other road users and local residents." An article written by Gregor Young.
From the National, Thursday the 11th of July, from the sports section. Luton Town will allow Scotland-capped star Alan Campbell to leave. Article by sport writer Robbie Hanratty. Alan Campbell is expected to depart Kenilworth Road this summer, Luton Town head coach Rob Edwards has confirmed. The 26-year-old Scottish international made his name at Motherwell, where he quickly became a fan favourite for his all-action displays in the midfield. Throughout his time at Fir Park, Campbell earned a reputation as a tireless worker who would cover every blade of grass, while also contributing crucial goals and assists. But since his move across the border in 2021, Campbell has endured a mixed experience. The one-time Motherwell hero did make a lasting impact during his 3 seasons with Luton Town. Over the course of 86 appearances, he found the back of the net on 7 occasions, endearing himself to the club's devoted supporters. During a pivotal moment in April 2023, Campbell scored the decisive goal as Luton defeated their fierce local rivals, Watford, 2-0 on their home turf. This crucial victory was a significant step in Luton's journey to securing promotion to the English Premier League through the playoffs. However, he slipped down the pecking order once the Hatters joined England's top flight, and that resulted in him dropping down to the Championship once again with a loan spell at Millwall. That never went to plan though. Campbell was reduced to just 12 outings and was often excluded from their matchday squad altogether. Al will be moving on, but at the moment he's training, he's here with us, and that's brilliant as we love having him around. Edwards clarified when asked about Campbell's future. Alan's an amazing professional and a brilliant guy, but he needs to get his career going again and get playing football as well. They're difficult decisions. We always try and do it very respectfully and be honest with people. We always try to do things with the club's best interests at heart, and always in a way where there's got to be a human side to it. The players want to play and they need to know where they stand as well, so it's important to have these honest conversations with the lads. And that article was written by Robbie Hanratty. From the National, Thursday the 11th of July, from the sports section, Women's Football. Martinez Loza calls on Scotland to finish Euro 25 qualifying in style. Report by Robbie Hanratty. Scotland women's national team manager Pedro Martinez Loza is urging his squad to deliver another strong performance when they face Slovakia on Friday evening. The Scots currently sit atop their Euro 2025 qualifying group, having accumulated 3 wins and 4 draws so far in their campaign. However, Martinez Loza has challenged his players to be even more clinical and ruthless in their final 2 qualifying matches. The Spanish coach wants to see his team capitalise on their dominant position in the group and secure maximum points from the remaining fixtures, starting in the western Slovakian city of Nitra. In the last camp we were more clinical in the final third, but that's not something you can assume is going to happen all the time, Martinez Loza said. The most important thing is to qualify, but in saying that, our ambition is to be at the highest level and finish unbeaten, as that will give us a feeling of success, strong and solid performances, not only from the offensive aspect, but no team can be competitive without being defensively consistent and reliable. We just have to go one step at a time and face the scenarios. Slovakia are playing for everything tomorrow because they need a point at least, or 3 to still have options of being in the playoffs. So, as much as we can have a feeling of part of the job is done, the job is finished when it's finished. For us, it's a new opportunity to prove ourselves, to prove the level of the team, to prove that we can be competitive in this context again, and the more we repeat, the more we can feel the reward of doing a good job. I think the mentality and the development of the team will progress. In an article written by Robbie Hanratty and read by me, Ian McKenna. From the National, Thursday the 11th of July, from the sports section, Stephen Robinson in Make an Impact St Mirren Euro vow. Report by David Irvin. Stephen Robinson has insisted St Mirren won't just make up the numbers in the Conference League later this month, as he targeted a prolonged run in the European competition. The Paisley club returned to football on the continent for the first time since 1987, when they enter the second qualifying round to face the winners of Icelandic side Valur and Kiev Vozania of Albania. Robinson was last night present for the first leg of the tie between St Mirren's potential opponents in Reykjavik. Despite the lengthy absence being ended by a return to the European fold, the St Mirren manager has demanded his side make their mark on the competition and exorcise the demons of past Scottish clubs suffering quick-fire exits. "We want to progress in it, we're not just happy to be there," said Robinson. "Yes, it's been a hell of a long time since St Mirren have been there, but that is not the atmosphere and desire that I believe the staff have created at the football club. We want to go and make an impact. I will go out to Iceland on Thursday to look at the game and we will do all our due diligence. It's an opportunity. In previous years, Scottish clubs haven't progressed as far as we would want to, and it is an opportunity for players to put themselves on the map and the football club. Fans are happy we didn't get any Northern Ireland teams, so it actually feels like a proper European draw. It is something we are going to embrace, but not something we are just happy to be there. We have to be better than that mentality-wise, and that's exactly what we will be. Robinson has experience in travelling to Iceland and Albania on footballing duties with the Northern Ireland setup, and equally won't be fazed by managing in Europe after leading Motherwell in Europa League qualifiers in 2020. But he has warned neither he nor his playing charges will be allowed to drop standards simply through securing qualification alone. International-wise, I've been to Iceland with Northern Ireland set up. He said, beautiful part of the world. Albania, I've also been to, another nice part of the world, a little bit hotter than Iceland. There are different challenges. We'll look at the teams, we've obviously got footage, and we will be as prepared as we can. We have waited a long time for it, but we certainly can't rest on our laurels and think we have done enough. And that report was by David Irvin.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Q and Review and to tell your friends about our service.